Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. This is Palmer Holt, founder and CEO of In Christ Communications. We're about ready to get started with today's webinar, the Crisis Connect webinar. Dan, if you wanted to throw me up on video, um, I can speak directly to folks and then we'll get back to the slide deck. But we'll wait a few more minutes to see, um, give people a little bit more time to come in. Hope you're all doing well. It's a beautiful spring day here in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. Sunshine, and got my doors and windows open, fresh air. You know, these days, fresh air is a good thing. But we'll just take a minute more and see if we get a couple other folks come in, and then we'll get started. Hope you all are doing well. Seems like things are loosening up some, looking better, not out of the woods, but, starting to emerge. And so hopefully things will get on track and can get back to, real life as soon as possible, but staying safe, of course, but, recognizing that you can't stay locked up forever. So, well, let's just go ahead and get started. I just wanted to welcome you. This is the Crisis Connect weekly webinar, and it's based on groups that we have in Facebook and LinkedIn that are places for collaboration among faith-based communications professionals, marketing professionals, development folks, maybe some executive, upper echelon executives along the way, but practitioners of communications where we can, talk among ourselves and share information, and we can sort of have an outlet for some things that we can bring to the body of Christ. So before I get started officially, let me just pray real quickly, and then we'll move into the presentation for today. So Lord, we just come before you. We just thank you for this time together. We thank you for the body of Christ, Lord, the fact that we're interconnected, Lord, that when one part feels something, the rest of it feels it. And so we are one in you, and you're one in us. The days that we're in are different days, but then not a surprise to you. And you have a plan for us to follow. We have the mind of Christ. So we just ask that we'd be able to follow that pillar of cloud, that pillar of fire, as you lead us through this life and these present circumstances. So we commit this time to you and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So, I already talked about the purpose of this. And by the way, we are recording this and we will send this webinar out in the next day or two. So if you want to take notes, take them, but if you don't have to. So it'll all be here, the slide deck itself, and of course the video. So let me introduce today's, well, let me mention this too. If for instance, somebody wants to talk deeper about a particular issue, we have free strategy sessions. Feel free to contact us, at your just leisure, as you feel led to do that. But we can help on a broader, deeper level if you want to have that kind of conversation. So anything, that's gratis. So let me introduce Diane Lonsdale to you. Diane is president of In Christ Communications. And honestly, she's so well qualified. I don't know what she's doing with me on one hand, but she is a branding, marketing, integrated communications architect, and thought leader. She comes out of the big time ad agency world, Los Angeles, Chicago, and she's done a lot of work for a lot of, consumer clients that or household names. She's also done a lot of work for nonprofits and some faith-based nonprofits. She's been with us, I guess, coming on 2 years maybe. Uh, and she's the person who, when someone comes into our agency and wants to talk to us about work, she's the first one they talk to. She sort of puts them through a process to work, so we figure out who they are, what they need, what they're looking for, what we can do for them, what we can't, and sort of figures that out. And she has a proprietary process called Lift, and she'll tell you all about that, about sort of what we put people through if we can to help understand who their brand, what their brand is, their messaging is, who their stakeholder universe is, really sort of lay a foundation for whatever we would want to try to do for them, and be consistent in the telling of that. So she's going to walk us through, this is a two-part presentation. This week, she's going to talk about Lift itself, and then it stands for Learn, Imagine, Frame, Tell. And then next week, there's a sort of a subset of that called storytelling, and how to tell your story in the midst of this Corona-19 crisis and the post world that we're going to be living in. That's for next week. But Dan, I'll just go ahead and turn it over to you. But let me mention this too. We will have time for questions and answers after her presentation. There should be a box at the bottom of your screen where you can submit questions. So please do that. Again, the video will be available. So Dan, I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you tell us about Lift, please.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here with you today and have an opportunity.
You might want to throw your video up. I think you got, oh, never mind. You got to talk through your slides.
I have slides.
All right, go ahead.
But you can see me. Here I am.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm really happy to talk to you. I hope I can share something with you today that you can use in your ministries and that you can use with your teams. Just to talk a little bit about the purpose of my talk today. And I kind of structured around the goals around this sort of 2 P's, pivot and progress. And so pivot, the idea is really, how do we all emerge from this coronavirus era with a refined brand communications that's more relevant, empathetic, and engaging than before the pandemic? So we all know that we're going through change. Our churches are going through change. Our ministries are going through change. And we are going to come through this stronger, wiser, godlier, and really, at the end of the day, better poised to serve our stakeholders. And that's what's important. And that's what God would have for us to do. So how do we pivot our communications in a way that really parallels what we're doing in our ministries? And then to progress. So I hope to provide you with some information and also some hands-on planning tools that you can use. After this meeting, you can use them this week, next week, you can call us, we can help you use them. That'll really help you to proactively sort of shine that spotlight on the path for you, for your brand communications coming out of this era. On average, we know through our clients that people, donors, prospects, constituents consider on average 10 or maybe even more charitable partners in a given year. And yet they donate to maybe 2, a little over 2, not counting their churches. And so the question is, how do we break into that inner circle and sort of command that loyalty or encourage that loyalty that we seek from our prospects and our donors? We know if you do a Google search, there's all kinds of information right now, marketing advice on how to navigate your way through the coronavirus. And we hope, Palmer and I, that through this meeting, we can help you to do that in a way that makes sense for your organization. Palmer already mentioned that we have a process, a program called Lift. We call it Lift to make it easy for people to remember. And it's a 4-step process that stands for Lift, Imagine, Frame, and Tell the Story. You'll have this infographic for your reference coming out of this meeting. But just to quickly touch on the steps, and I'm going to unpack each one in a little bit more detail. But learn is, how do we take all the data that's available to us, either proprietary data or data that we find out in the secondary, research world, and really consolidate that so it's actionable for us. I'll talk to you about a system for doing a situation analysis that looks at really 4 pillars. your brand, your ministry, the constituents that you serve, any alternative organizations that people might come alongside, and then also the culture. And the culture is so important right now. And then coming out of that, we'll look at Imagine. So what is your Evolve brand future going to look like? You know, it's hard to hit the bullseye if you haven't accurately drawn the target. So we'll help you really define that target, and more importantly, define that bullseye for your most crystallized, concise brand message. And then framing, you know, this is sort of building the framework like you would build a framework for a house. Once we set the foundation, we need to structure it so that we know that that house is built with integrity according to the vision that we had or the blueprints that we had set up. And I'll talk to you about some tools that we use there, like message mapping, content planning, and brand architecture. And in fact, I'm going to give you some blank templates that you can use with your own teams to work through some of that. And then, as Palmer mentioned, telling the story. So all the planning in the world doesn't do us any good unless we can tell a story with passion, with integrity, and with a vitality that really attracts people to our brand. So that's Lift in a nutshell. And let's just dive right into the first step, which is learn. And each step has like 3 mini steps to it. But the overarching goal in our first phase is to take data overload and translate it into actionable insight. If you're like many of our clients, you have lots of information. Google Analytics, you might have primary studies, you have competitive audits that you can do in your social media, and there's a lot of information, but how do you take that data and mine it so that you sort of sift gold? Where's the gold in the data? And that comes in the interpretation phase. And then how do we take the data and interpret the data in a way that really sets our ministries up to act upon it? Because data is only as important as the action that we can take from it. To give you just a little more insight into what we do when we conduct these various steps. In the data mining section, we're going to be looking at cultural trends, which I already mentioned are so important right now. Competitive audits, that might be a marketing audit, could be data analytics and research. We move into an interpretive phase, and we use different techniques to help consolidate that information so that we can understand what's really meaningful. Customer journeys, decision cues and triggers, competitive brand maps, and then mobilizing into action. We look at opportunity mapping, brand positioning, and deep dive targeting. We can do as much or as little as any of our clients need or want. And you have this model also, so you can do as much or as little as you need for your own ministries. Just to give you a little more information on how this becomes a reality in some of the ministries that we work with, we conduct a situation analysis to begin, and it might follow a sort of traditional SWOT analysis. I'm sure that you guys are familiar with SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We need to look at our brand. What is the SWOT for our brand, for our ministries in a traditional environment, but more importantly, today, in an environment where our brand is under pressure. During the coronavirus epidemic, what has happened that's most significant on your story that people are going to care about? And here's just a few questions that we ask ourselves and we ask our clients. How will the deep cultural megatrends like economic insecurity, like health concerns, if you work for a healthcare organization, senior living organization, how will it impact the importance or relevance of your brand message? Or how have you pivoted to online, digital, or remote ministry? What has been the impact on your constituents? What's been the impact on your ministry? Like I said, we're going to come through this stronger. How has the COVID-19 crisis impacted your constituents and their relationship to you? That's so important for us to turn the lens around and look at the world the way our constituents look at it. And then how has your ministry's needs been met in ways that maybe alternative ministries may not have met the needs in the same way? And what's most relevant to your ministry? To give you a little bit better picture of this with some hands-on examples, I've highlighted 2 areas, and I call it lessons from the ICC trenches, but I'd like to take you through some messaging, some learning that 2 of our clients did relevant to these 2 topics. cultural megatrends, and then looking at how our ministries meet needs in ways that alternate ministries haven't. And the first organization I want to talk to you about is Bless Your Pastor. If you were here 2 weeks ago, you met Brian Cluth, who is our client and also the program director for Bless Your Pastor. And Bless Your Pastor is a campaign that is sponsored by Lilly Endowment and is associated with the National Association of Evangelicals. It's a movement to teach Christians and leaders of churches to come alongside their pastors and to offer blessing to them in whatever ways God touches our hearts. And our organization teaches and encourages and edifies people on how to do that. So it may be financial blessing, it might be blessing in terms of services or encouragement through notes or gift baskets or whatever. But our Bless Your Pastor campaign was introduced last year, and we sort of rallied our campaign up and around the October Pastor Appreciation Month. Well, this year, given what's going on with COVID, our client, Brian Cluth, decided to sponsor a study called State of the Plate to sort of understand, like I talked about, cultural megatrends, what is going on, and how will that impact his ministry. What we were able to find out in a study that we just finished last week, a constituent-based study of Brian Cluth and the Bless Your Pastor organization, was that during COVID-19, new poll that we conducted, it was called State of the Plate, reveals that almost 2/3 of churches are seeing a drop in giving. Now, this is really significant when you look at how does cultural megatrends impact your ministry. For our client, Bless Your Pastor, what that indicated to us is that we needed to get this information out. So when we last year started our campaign in around the July timeframe, we decided to start talking about this right now with our constituents so that they could become sensitized to what was going on in the churches. And this is clearly going to impact the financial well-being of pastors. We put a press release out that said COVID-19 new poll reveals almost 2/3 of churches see a drop in giving. More than 6 out of 10 churches see offerings decline in various degrees during the lockdown. And if you look at this graphic, you can see that the amount of churches that are down significantly outweigh the amount of churches that are steady or up. So this is just going to impact and heighten sensitivities around gaining information about how people can bless your pastors. Here is just an example. Our story was picked up in many news outlets. Here's an example of one, the Washington Times. Coronavirus drains donations to church. So this client took expedient action to deliver timely information, providing their constituents education that's going to start sensitizing and setting their hearts towards this communications effort. We have another client that really did something very different, and they decided to reach out to their constituents in a very dynamic way that alternative organizations were not. And this organization is Trail Life USA. Trail Life USA is a faith-based scouting organization. They have about 26,000 boys in the United States that are affiliated with this scouting organization. And they said, let's do something else, something different that other organizations aren't in the COVID-19 environment. What Trail Life USA decided to do was to sponsor the first ever national backyard campout. Yay, this was really fun for the kids. They did it last weekend, and ICC worked quickly with our client to put this really interesting and relevant information to demonstrate their passion for youth in the name of Christ, and invited thousands of families across the United States to take part in the first national backyard campout. And we put that out to lots of different media outlets. It was picked up in print, and this is just an example of a local TV station that actually ran some footage about the national backyard campout. And here's some boys enjoying. So it's just taking advantage of what your ministries are doing, changing, adapting, pivoting, and serving that back out to your constituents constituents in a way that really just captures their imaginations and hearts. So I thought you would be blessed by those two examples of things that our clients are doing, and maybe that would give you some ideas for how you can also pivot in this time of COVID-19. The next step was imagine, the step of imagine. And again, in imagine, we're looking to really help our clients move from a communications platform that is often dominated by what we do and how we do it and the steps that we're taking and the activities that we're engaging in, to really what is the heartbeat behind that and why do we do that? And the 3 steps that we engage in there are: step 1, defining and clarifying our purpose as a ministry, helping ministries build their architecture, and then visualizing personality. Because believe it or not, people react to ministries and organizations to the personality that you're serving out in your storytelling, in your visual communications, as well as the message. Again, to give you just a little bit of a deep dive into each one of these steps, in defining clarity and purpose, we're looking at things like not only functional benefits, but what are the emotional benefits that people are attaching to? And how does that help us to define our brand trajectory? For building architecture, we look at brand promise, the support structures, that features and information that we can talk about for our brands. And then to visualize our personality, we actually do things like develop collages and mood boards to help demonstrate the brand personality. But in today's talk, I want to talk to you a little bit about this topic of emotional benefits. If you have ever heard any of the TED Talks that Simon Sinek is pretty famous for doing, he talks about the golden circle. And we've been inspired by some of that, and we talk about our own methodology for understanding emotional benefits and why it's so important to start with the why. So if we look at the way people build beliefs about brands, we have to first study the what we do. What do we do? What's the impact? What's the proof? And really identify that. But secondly, we look at the process. How do we do what we do? What's the specific action that we take? And what are the results that we produce? But the heartbeat of the organization is really the purpose. What is the heartbeat of your organization, your cause? What is the essence of your ministry? Because just like people develop relationships with people, they develop relationship with brand and ministries based on heartfelt needs. And that's what we really want to take a look at in a little bit more detail. To help us understand the why, we have to understand where our constituents are coming from. Well, I am sure that you already know and probably already feel that during the coronavirus pandemic, everyone is in a heightened emotional state. And you have to consider that for your brand. What are the emotional benefits that your brand provides? And what are their consequences? Just quickly to show you some research, the American Psychiatric Association's, it's a new study, I think it's about 2 weeks old, shows that 48%, almost half of Americans are anxious about the possibility of getting the coronavirus. Even more are anxious about the possibility of a friend or a loved one being infected with the disease. We see that 36% of Americans have a serious mental concerns, anxiety issues having to do with the coronavirus. And 59% say it's having a serious impact on their everyday lives. We as ministries, we as organizations, communicators have to take this into consideration. How do we do that? Well, we understand what people are dealing with on an emotional context, and then we look at how does our brand alleviate, how do our ministries alleviate some of those emotional concerns? Depending on how you look at this, we know that there are many universal emotional values that function, and in pretty much many different arenas, and particularly in ministry arenas. And here is a wheel of 10 different emotions. If you look at them, it starts to feel like the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, but then truth, wisdom, integrity, justice, hope, service, and devotion. How does your ministry understand what people are dealing with and deliver, instead of those negative emotions, something positive like this? And let us just show you how one of our clients has really taken this to heart. And that client is SAT7. Sat7 is a Christian satellite television broadcasting organization that broadcasts particularly in the Middle East and North Africa to, I think it's 25 countries, and broadcasts in Arabic and Persian and Turkish. So they appeal to people in their native languages. They provide real life broadcasting to both adults and children. And Sat7 recognized that their public were dealing with these emotions, these anxiety producing emotions. And they thought, how do we provide messaging that alleviates some of that and provides the emotional security that they're looking for? And what they decided to do is to actually put out communications with ICC's help to calm the wave of fear with God's peace. So this is an organization that talks about, through their television broadcast, they have many, many different program formats that offer real life people talking about real life situations to both adults and children. So here is just one press release. Faith-fueled satellite TV combats coronavirus wave of fear with God's peace. So it talks about, what does it mean to be a follower of Christ? What is the peace that we can know of Christians, particularly in an emotionally charged environment such as coronavirus? People are feeling anything but peace. They're feeling fear. But as Christians, as Christ followers, we can know that peace that passes all understanding. Another way that Sat7, with our help, was able to project their message was the idea of replacing desperation with a sense of hope. You know, as Christians, we're offered a living hope in Jesus Christ. And Sat7 was able to take that understanding of the desperation of people feeling right now and today, and suggest that they replace that with hope, the hope that we know through following Christ, and that can be communicated and felt and experienced through their online broadcasting. So here's two examples of how Sat7 was really able to raise the emotional context of their constituents through very dialed in messaging that dealt with the emotional benefits that they offer. Now at this point, I'd like to introduce a word picture to you, and it's a light coming through a prism, and as the light comes through the prism, it reflects a rainbow. I like to think of the light, that true, pure white light, as not only the faith that we all experience through Jesus Christ, but also when we distill our messaging down to its purest form, like I was just talking about using some of the techniques that we offer and that I just talked to you about, we take it into the prism. The prism is sort of like our framework. How do we frame out those insights and those understandings into very actionable mechanisms that can then produce a rainbow? I like to think of that rainbow as the creative product, or the stories that we tell through all of our various media, whether that's social media, your websites, what you're doing in broadcast media, or through print. It's almost like every media outlet is a different color of the rainbow, but all together it forms this beautiful picture. Everything is important and it all works together, and that's what we try to accomplish at ICC. So the next phase really gets into this sort of prism analogy, and how do you frame out your insights into action? And in so doing, we like to, some of our clients come to us with out of sync messaging, and we like to help them organize that messaging and bring that into amplified brand storytelling, the way we did with Sat7, the way we did with Bless Your Pastor and others. You know, we know that today many different people are creating content. Many different people are writing messages for our various organizations. And sometimes that messaging can get a little bit out of sync. So this is helpful. We create narrative. We help them define media. We help our clients define the media outlets. And then very importantly, fit the message into the media, because not all media outlets do well with the same exact same messaging. It needs to be customized and fit to the media environment. When we do this, we establish what we call horizontal frequency. Horizontal frequency is sort of like if you think about all these various touch points. Think about the average consumer. They have so many different media touch points, even from the same organizations. It's almost like a mosaic, and every little tile fits perfectly into making this beautiful picture. And that's what horizontal frequency is. Every different media touch point needs to tell that same story, maybe in slightly different ways, slightly different colors, but it comes across to make a beautiful picture. And that's what we're after at the end of the day for our clients. So how do we do that? Creating narrative through brand storytelling, creating copy guidelines and style guides for our clients, defining the media and our message plan, and then, as I just said, fitting that message to the media, no matter what media outlet you're using. So to take that a step further, framing our compelling story requires strong narrative based on sturdy copy blocks, building blocks. And the things that we use, and I'm going to show you on the next slide, that we've been using for years with various clients depending on their need. But we look at things like brand architecture, message mapping, platform-specific content planning, and marketing toolkit. Now I'm going to show you one slide that's kind of a crazy slide because it shows all of these different mapping systems on one. And I'm not going to go through each and every one, but just so that you know that there's so many different tools that you can use to help you organize your messaging. All are useful, and it really just depends on what it is you need. So these first two, or these two on, I guess, catty corners, the left corner here, and this pyramid at the bottom, really help you organize insights. How does a ministry or a brand organize its insights into ways that build upon each other and make sense and set up the brand for very engaging storytelling? This one over here that looks like a map or circular map is really about plotting your various messages. These are different messages, and this is actually one of the templates that I'm going to provide you so you can work with it in an organized fashion, so that no matter if I'm a social media writer or I'm somebody writing a PR news release, I can go to that overarching storytelling message map and make sure that my message is on target with what our brand is trying to communicate. And then down here at the bottom, once all the messages are created, we need marketing toolkits, brand elements, design, marketing toolkits, and metrics to be able to get that message out in a cohesive way, and then be responsible and accountable to the fact that that message is doing what it needs to do every day. And so to demonstrate this in a little bit more detail, I'm going to go to one of our clients, which is the Retirement Reformation. The Retirement Reformation was started about 2 years ago by our client named Bruce Burinsma, and he's actually participated in this webinar in the past. I don't know if he's on today. But he's written actually several books, but the cornerstone book is The Retirement Reformation, that really gives a new way of thinking about vital, purpose-driven living in retirement. Talks about the world is saying it's time to stop, but you could be starting to have your greatest impact. So it's this idea of God, just because our work stops, it doesn't mean that our calling, that God's calling on our life stops, that he may have some of our most, or the most impactful work and ministry that we can do as retirees or people approaching retirement. And that's really his vision. It wraps itself around 5 key pillars, which are the financial pillar, the healthy living pillar, the relational pillar, the emotional pillar, and then most importantly, the spiritual pillar. And last year, ICC created this brand architecture pyramid that really consolidates the messaging that we were going forward to do with Retirement Reformation. This also is another one of the useful guides that I have included in your templates for today. But starting with brand purpose, what I was talking about, that why, that core why, the brand purpose for Retirement Reformation was the freedom to experience retirement life fully in and for Christ. The brand promise was retirement reformation gives Christians a new way to think about retirement that frees them to own the full, abundant life of kingdom impact that God has planned for them. Brand personality, empowering, passionate, godly, wise, and inspiring, compassionate with an edge. Brand support pillars, I just went through these with you, the 5 different pillars and plans. And then we have lots of materials that we use to offer people engagement with retirement reformation that really provide the bottom tier of support, sturdy foundation for this organization overall. This is I showed you a small version, but just so that you know, we also developed a marketing toolkit that we use to take this messaging out last year to all the various constituents, everything from a PR plan, SEO, SEM plan, social media plan, PR plan, etc., metrics and analytics. So this is what we use to introduce the retirement reformation to the public last year. In terms of integrating messaging, we talked about why is the brand architecture important? It's important because it guides all of your messaging so that at the end of the day, whether people see a webinar sponsored by Bruce, they see a TV show in which he appeared in an interview, CTVN, or whether they read the book, they're getting the same message with the same look, tone, and feel. We integrated across social media. And you can see that even though there's different social media posts dealing with financial pillar, maybe the relational pillar over here, the healthy living pillar down here, it all looks and speaks the same message about thinking and developing a new look on retirement for a new generation of retirees. And so the retirement reformation, though, this year, started thinking, and ICC brainstorming along with them over the last several weeks. If you think about the way seniors are being portrayed in today's media environment. If you think about various information that you've heard about retirement communities or people over the age of 60 or senior citizens, you are hearing them portrayed as a vulnerable population, as the vulnerable population that is experiencing the highest death rates and is most vulnerable to the disease. And when we started, which is really very contrary to the brand personality that I just talked about, the empowering leadership type brand personality that we crafted and we envisioned for retirement reformation. When we started brainstorming with the client a few weeks ago, and we said, well, what's the other side of that coin? What's the other side of the vulnerable coin? What is the message that we should be telling people, seniors, people approaching their retirement years, that might give a different perspective? Again, what is it we can do that maybe some other alternate ministries may not be doing? And what we decided to do with retirement reformation is to, in this period of time, position seniors as leaders, not victims, as the coronavirus anxiety spreads. Now, I can't share the news release with you because it hasn't even hit the press yet. It's just being developed and it'll be released this week. So maybe you'll see it out in the press. But the idea here is, think about it. Senior citizens have served through Vietnam, through some of them back to the Great Depression, some of them all the way back to World War II, but certainly through economic downturns, through various struggles that this country has had. And they have survived, and not even just survived, they have thrived through it. So we have said, along with retirement reformation, let's portray that lens on seniors in America, and they can really rise to a level where they can serve younger generations as mentors, as people that have experience about what it means to thrive through difficult times and good times and come out on the other side. So this is kind of our new, from the ICC trenches with retirement reformation, but we think it's really compelling and true, very true messaging for a time such as this for retirement reformation. So moving on to the last pillar, which is T, telling the story. We really want to help our clients move from a state where some of them are a little passive. They may look like other ministries out there. Everybody, we're all trying to fulfill the Great Commission. We all have wonderful stories to tell, but we need to tell ours with a unique voice and a unique passion and a unique persona that people will recognize as coming from only our ministries and our ministry's heart alone. So that turns our ministries into active and engaged brands. And to do that, again, our little 3 steps: we ignite the news, dominate digital, and optimize on an ongoing basis. To look at that in a little more detail, for igniting news, we're talking about things like, and we've talked about these in previous webinars, like with Bruce Johnson last week. We talked about news releases and feature stories and opinion pieces and radio interviews. These are important ways to ignite the news and get the news media to tell the story that we think is important for them to tell, not the story that they choose to tell about our clients. Dominating digital. How do we get email, digital sponsorships, social media, all working in a way that we can tell a story that's even grander than the amount of money that we may have to spend on digital media? And then optimize ongoing. We talked about data overload, but there is a way to use data, Google Analytics, and trackers in a way that you can constantly be ongoing, optimizing your message as you go forward. And it's our responsibility to help our clients do that. So as Palmer mentioned in the beginning, this is quite a robust side of the equation here, the last letter T in telling the story. So we're going to save it for next week. We have some of the people that create content available to help us tell that story and input that story for us. And we'll be talking about what is it that makes a good story. Think of your brand as something that you would tell your family or friends about because it interests you. And if it interests you and connects with your heart, and you have become sensitive to your constituents' heart, it will be a good story to them too. And so we'll be talking about that next week. I would like to say one more thing. We will, in the next day or two, be sending you, if you're a member of our panel, a Crisis Connect survey. And we are doing this to help us reach out to you and be sensitive to you, to understand what it is that you're dealing with from a communication standpoint. What is it that you need the most help with? What is it that you've seen increase or decrease from a communications perspective? And since we're all interested in communications in this group and in this webinar, we're going to kind of look at this data together and make some action plans coming out of it. So I just invite you to please look for that email and participate in that survey, and we have some sort of free gifts to give you as our thank you if you will help us do that. So with that, I think we're at the moment that we can accept questions or any further conversation. Or Palmer, if you have something you would like to say.
Yeah, if you have, this has been a very informative session, and the value of this content coming from Diana is pretty outstanding. This kind of information hopefully is useful to you, but it really is, this is sort of the foundation for so much of what you do on a communications level. So if you would, there's a box at the bottom of the screen that says Q&A. If you've got questions, you can type those in. We'll get to those. But we do have a few questions already that we'll go ahead and get Diane started on. Hang on one second, make sure that I'm coming through clearly. Okay. So first question, Diane, is why is brand clarity and central messaging so foundational and important?
Well, I think we talk about that through everything that, that the LIFT stands for. We want to, and I think maybe I wrapped it up a little bit at the end when I said, we're all called by God to fulfill the Great Commission, and we all have an important message to tell. But we want to tell our own unique version of that message. And, God's ordained each one of our ministries, each one of our churches, to tell that message in a slightly different way, because it's just like the body of Christ. We're all unique. And so I think brand clarity is so important, so that we can tell that message in our own unique way. And why that's important is because with all the media noise and with everybody telling messages, even good messages, we need to be seen in order to align people to our mission and our vision for what God's called for us to do. So that would be my answer to that. Palmer, I don't know if you want to add something.
No, I think that's a strong answer. Let me get to the second question. It says, what is the difference between lift and a traditional branding study? And I would just add the caveat that a lot of people sort of balk at a traditional branding study can be a very big undertaking, can cost a lot of money. And especially if, and the research is the part that usually makes it the dollars go up. But what's the difference between lift and a traditional branding study, Diane?
That's true. I think sometimes research can be expensive, but in today's digital age, it is getting more and more affordable and more accessible for, you know, pretty much anybody to be able to participate in. My short answer to that question is lift starts where a branding study ends. So when I told you that a lot of our clients are swimming in data, many clients come to me and they may have a study. They may have a study they paid a lot of money for, but they just can't really figure out how to wrap their arms around that and make it something that they could maybe walk around with on one sheet or one pyramid that could direct everything that they're doing from a communications standpoint as an organization. So the easy answer is, you know, research is, as I mentioned, one of the first things that we look to, but it's only a starting point, and our lift takes it through that whole interpretive phase and the, you know, how do you make this into messages that distinguish your brand from another brand in ways that branding studies never even purport to do.
Right. Okay, great. Next question. I think I understand our brand and messaging, but maybe I am too close to it. How important is third-party opinion?
Yeah, that's a really insightful question, whoever asked that. You know, I just completed this was a primary piece of research for one of my clients. And it was interesting because we talked to staff, and we talked to people currently very close to the ministry, actually participating in the ministry. We talked to core donors, and we talked to prospects, people who had maybe heard of the ministry but were not yet aligned with the ministry. And what we found was that those people that were very close to the ministry really were not a very good lens into what the constituents were feeling. And some aspects they were, but in others, they were exactly as this question said, we're just too close to it. They just did not see they did not have the sensitivities and did not see the extended benefits the same way that prospects were seeing it. So I think it's really important to always, I like to say, it's like if you have a lens on a camera, it's like turning, and you're looking out, you're the one taking the picture and you see what you see. But sometimes you have to turn that lens around and see what they see. And that's what makes the most meaningful communications.
Right. And I know we've done some branding work on our own agency. And I think I know who we are, and because it has a lot to do with who I am. But then when you see how somebody else sees you, it really is a revelation.
Mm-hmm.
Always one or two that you had no idea that are significant, because at the end of the day, it's how they see you, not how you see yourself, that
Exactly.
makes a difference. So,
And I mean, I would just say one more thing is just don't be afraid of the word research, because research can be done. You know, we can go out and you can, or we can do a social media audit. That's a way to do research. That's the way to gather information about the way people are perceiving, you know, your ministry. So there's various ways to gather information.
right, there's quantitative research and there's qualitative research. Quantitative that's where the dollars start adding up, but there are other ways to find out on a smaller budget, get the information that you're looking for. So, next question. How do you determine which emotional benefits are most relevant for your ministry?
That's a good question. Um, there's ways to do that. There's ways of doing that through research. There's also ways that I've done that just working with brand teams or internal groups to just say, what are all the feet when we looked at the pyramid, or even the circle, where we build foundation, we talk about what does the ministry actually do? Does the ministry offer materials? Retirement reformation is a good example. They offer books and resources and curriculum guides and Bible studies. But at the end of the day, what does that help people to do? So we want people to start thinking differently about retirement. Okay, why is that important? Well, it gives people a new sense, maybe a renewed sense of purpose. Maybe it opens their eyes to possibilities that God would have for them that they didn't see before this. So you always sort of like keep that investigation going to try to find out what is that heartbeat of your ministry. And it's not just something that you pull out of the air or pull off that wheel that I was showing you, just like SAT-7. It has to come out of that real, true programming and what it is that programming offers. For that client, it was hope and peace in the midst of storm, because it was real life people talking to them. So each individual client is probably going to have a different take on the emotional benefit.
Okay, great. Next question. Who or what organizations typically do you need to take into account as stakeholders or constituencies or audiences?
Mm-hmm. I always think it's good to look at both internal and external if you can. So we talk a lot about communications. It's as professional communicators, and if some of the people who are participating in this webinar, maybe you run it, maybe you lead a team of communications people, or maybe you are the chief communicator. We often think of external communications. I think it's really important to include internal as well, because you always want to balance the external view from the internal view, and you need your internal teams to be more informed than your external teams. You need to inform them first and most expediently, and keep them in the loop with the messaging. But when looking at that, we look at staff, we look at donors, like I mentioned. You may define a prime prospect for your ministry. Who is your ideal donor? Who would you love to come alongside your ministry? Talk to them, find them. You'll find people out there that attitudinally are very consistent, charitably minded. Maybe, let's say your ministry is a recovery ministry, may have a heart for addictions or youth or whatever your ministry is. Just haven't come alongside you yet. Go find those people and talk to them.
Right. Next question, and we probably have time for a question or two more. Says, can ICC and Christ Communications help us unearth the kinds of stories that the media might be interested in and help us tell those stories? Question mark.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I think it starts from the kind of work that we did with SAT-7, with Bless Your Pastor. And I'll let Palmer weigh in on this too, but the media is looking for something that's newsworthy. They're looking for the first, the onlys. They're looking for new information. Bless Your Pastor was able to provide them with that new information on how is church giving and how is that affecting, pastoral staff. They're also looking at it for stories that are going to, appeal to people's passions and their hearts, and leverage those as well. And that's what we looked at with a SAT-7 or retirement reformation. But yes, we definitely we do that every day. We help structure messaging and pitch it out to the media in ways that they will listen to.
And I'm an ex-newspaper editor, so I've got a pretty good nose for news. And I can, and especially in the faith-based realm, we find a lot of stories that are interesting, but they're not necessarily news. But we're really good at sort of finding rough stones and holding them up in the right light and polishing them up and finding ways to frame things that, if you look at it the right way with the right end in mind, it is news. But it's not an easy thing to do. It boils down to, it's sort of a discernment gift, and I have a pretty good idea, and that folks on our staff have a pretty good idea about what constitutes news. A lot of things people want to push out there. It's interesting. It may even be important, but it's not necessarily news. And so we need to find these news hooks, and whether it turns into a hard news press release, a feature story, pitch letter that's got different story angles in it, or an opinion piece, we're pretty good at finding because we have to work hard to find sometimes in our space to find things that the world cares about. So, but it's something that I think we're pretty good at. I think we're coming up on the close of our meeting. So let me just sort of wrap this up. Again, Diane, thank you so much for taking the time to unpack this for us.
My pleasure.
It's a what's this process that she's got with us? It's extremely valuable, and it's what we try to put everybody through that comes into the agency that we work with, so we can really get things straight and tell their stories through branding and messaging on a consistent basis. So
can I just say one more thing, Palmer?
Yeah.
Or just show you guys these slides. Here's, if you download my slides, at the end of it, you'll see some additional templates. And here's some instruction on how to do the brand pyramid, and a blank pyramid that you can fill in with your teams, or you can fill in yourselves. And then same thing with message mapping, the story construct. How do you create your brand story? Some instruction, and then a blank message map that you can use with your team. So thank you for showing that.
Great. So just before we sign off, again, thanks for coming. Remember that the groups on Facebook and LinkedIn, if you haven't joined them, please join them. If you have others that you might want to invite to that conversation, that community, please do that. If you want to have a strategy session with us where you want to talk about something in particular, we're happy to do that gratis. And then next week, Diane's going to wrap up and turn around and do this telling part of the LIFT strategy, the storytelling, basically how to tell your story in the midst of the coronavirus 19 crisis right now, and the post-crisis, because we're going to be living in the wake of this thing for the next 6 months, a year, and it's never going to get back to what it was before. There's going to be aspects of this that are going to affect how we communicate going forward. But most people need to think about recalibrating, taking a hard look at possibly recalibrating their branding and messaging in light of what's going on right now and what the near term looks like.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, even though it looks like a process, it doesn't have to be a long, laborious process. So you saw for SAT 7, for Bless Your Pastor, we turn these things around in a matter of days or a week. Like some of it is really a quick turnaround. So just wanted to make sure that the people watching the webinar understand that it can be a small scope or it can be a larger scope.
But it's absolutely foundation and fundamental to anything you want to do, because if you don't understand your brand and your messaging and your stakeholders, and you're clear about that, it doesn't matter what you shoot at, you're not going to hit it, because the target's going to be out of focus. So we really recommend getting it in focus first. So anyhow, thanks for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate it, and hope to see you next week, and talk among yourselves in the groups. So Lord bless. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.